Here to unlock this holocron, here's the
How are we all doing? How are we all doing? It is your boy AlsoTeeko, and we are back on the block. We have a fun episode today. I'm very excited to bring this to you guys. Getting my screens organized real quick so that we're all Gucci Manucci, and then we are ready to rumble. Beautiful. Boosh, boosh, and we're not talking Leia. Alrighty. So, welcome to the Archives podcast. My name is AlsoTeeko, and we have a very fun topic today. We're going to be deep diving into the sequel trilogy as we are on episode 7. So I felt like it was fitting to start episode 7 with the sequel trilogy. Going to be talking about all 3 films today, just combining them all into one major podcast, and gonna be having a lot of fun with it. So without further ado, let's get right into episode 7 of the Archives podcast. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and if you're willing, leave us a 5-star review. The first 10 people that leave us a 5-star review, screenshot it and send it to us at Star Wars TAP, will be entered into a giveaway and ready to rumble. I'm very, very hyped for that. But as far as the show goes today, I'm hyped for this one as well. And we're ready to rumble. We are ready to rumble. So this is a solo episode, just so you guys are aware. I might get someone to hop in at some point, but the reason why I'm going live and bringing this to you guys now is because I'm gone all next week. This time next week, I'll be in Scotland, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting an episode a week. And the easiest way for me to do that is to go live today, record next week's episode on Wednesday, because the weekend, Sunday, which is normally when we record our episodes, I'll be flying to Scotland. So I'm very excited for that, but we'll have to see how that goes, getting that episode prepped and ready to rumble. So we're going to be breaking these down into episode 7, episode 8, episode 9, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. And we're going to have some fun with it. So let's just hop in. And I do want to remind, if anyone hops in and wants to ask a question, I will answer any and all questions as soon as there is a fitting time for it. So, The Force Awakens, a movie that comes with a plethora of opinions. A movie that is synonymous with really the reinvention, so to say, of Star Wars. It's a movie that introduced a lot of things into canon, and it's a movie that is hounded with controversy for the plot, for what happened, and for what it led into. But it did have tons and tons of speculation and tons of theory material and plenty of stuff to talk about. And even from the trailer, you got to see things that you just haven't seen in canon before. You got to see Kylo Ren with his crossguard lightsaber, which was absolutely, I remember that was one of the most cool things that I've seen, and we got to see that in the trailer. We got to see Finn as a stormtrooper, and I remember the first trailer that I saw for that movie, it was Finn huffing and puffing in his stormtrooper attire on Jakku. And it made me super excited for the film. And I thoroughly enjoyed The Force Awakens. I came out of that movie theater in 2015 happier than I'll get up. You know, I was immensely happy. It was Star Wars for the first time in 10 years. And the fact that we're probably going to get another trilogy in about 5-6 years, that's pretty cool to me. But The Force Awakens, it had a lot of excitement and anticipation before the film. There were leaks and rumors that Harrison Ford was going to be in it, Luke Skywalker was going to be in it, Princess Leia was going to be in it. All three were, given they all had individual roles that had certain meaning and others didn't. Harrison Ford replayed his role as Han Solo. Carrie Fisher came back as, now it was General Leia Organa, and Luke Skywalker reprised his role as Luke Skywalker. Shout out to Mark Hamill, that's my guy. But I'm pandering here. It was a film that kind of took each of those characters a step back. You got to see what made Leia. But as far as Han and Luke, I feel like they kind of got done dirty, and Han was somewhat used as just a comedy character, which I feel like was a tough role for him. It was a tough role for him because I know Harrison Ford didn't want to come back in the first place, but when the main character of the entire trilogy is your son, you kind of have to come back. But to aid and abet that, they had the main character kill his father, which I enjoyed because it was a stark contrast of the episode prior, episode 6, where the main character saved his father. In this one, the main character kills his father. And I am saying main character talking about Ben because in my estimations, in my opinion, the main character of the sequel trilogy is Kylo Ren. I know that everyone's going to say it's Rey, but truthfully, I think that the main character is Ben Solo. I think Rey is a fantastic character, one hell of a Jedi. I always say she's the most powerful Jedi in canon, but I think she was the engine to Ben's redemption, and similar to Anakin, Ben was already into his evil phase as we get into the Force Awakens, and similar to episode 4 where Anakin's already Vader, Ben is already Kylo as we get into the Force Awakens. So there's a nice bit of similarity there from grandfather and grandson, and it does take each of them 3 movies to ultimately redeem. And the thing that I love about their similarities is they both pass away at the end to aid and further save the person that they love. For Ben, it's Rey. For Anakin, it's Luke. So I really enjoyed that, and I feel like that's kind of a subtle thing that kind of goes under the radar, because obviously a lot of people say that the sequels were carbon copies, if not knockoffs, of the original trilogies. And I do understand that, and I do get that, and I do believe that in a certain epitome, right? But at the end of the day, it is a story that's being told. And with The Force Awakens, it did a plethora of world building, and it created the sense of where the galaxy was how things were going about and what was happening at the time. Granted, you had a bunch of characters get introduced, and a handful of them were impactful upon the true story of the movie and what was moving it forward. Those characters were Kylo Ren, Rey, and Finn at the time. Finn was a huge part of The Force Awakens. He was a huge part of The Force Awakens. He was the kind of the first character that we follow. And then he was kind of the engine character as well for Rey, because if Finn doesn't do what Finn does on Jakku, we never run into Rey. Rey and Finn never steal the Millennium Falcon. They never get off Jakku. They probably die. Right? So Finn is ultimately the engine character in episode 7. Which I understand why people, and including John Boyega, have such a problem with his representation and his writing in the further 2 films, because he went from being a pivotal character to being a comedy character and a side character. Which, when you take someone and you put them on this pedestal, you tell us why they're important, you give them a story, people want to see more of his story, learn more about his character. And when you pull him back, and rather than give us what we want, you give us even less of the character, then your time kind of feels wasted a little bit. You know, it's like waiting around for someone all day and they never show up. That's what it felt like for Finn throughout the sequel trilogy. I feel like he was more important than he was ever made out to be, and the writing probably was what it was. I don't want to talk about outside the universe, though. I want to talk about in universe. And with Finn, you get the sense that he was kind of just, for lack of a better term, in the wrong place at the wrong time with how everything was unfolding. Because if everything went slightly better, I think Finn gets a better chance and he gets a better go at it. But because Rey happened to have everything to do with the reignition and the reinstitutionalizing of hope with the, I like to call them the rebels, the rebellion, Finn was kind of put on the back burner a little bit, and you know, he got subjugated to having to go to Canto Bight, having to go find a master code breaker. And it sucked because a lot of people were Finn fans, and a lot of people really looked forward to seeing Finn, a prominent character that ran away from the First Order. He was a former stormtrooper, ran away from it, didn't agree with its ideals. And of course you do see that come to fruition in episode 9, where he runs into more former stormtroopers. But you just get the sense that in episode 8, his story kind of got mudded up, and he did get put on the back burner. And I mean, shout out to J.J. Abrams for trying to make him more prominent in episode 9. But I feel like that's the issue with splitting up a series and having different writers, is that I think the legacy of the sequel trilogy is that they were glorified fan films from people who weren't Star Wars fans. And people were just making movies that they wanted to make because they wanted to have the impact on canon. And it's super unfortunate because I feel like that time could have been used in such a better way. And it's going to take a lot of work to not just course correct and get things on par with it, because going from episode 6 to episode 7 is a huge, like, a lot needs to happen. A lot needs to happen. And it's not like there's a whole lot of time. There's about 20-30 years, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things is a lot of time, but the stark difference of point A to point B is drastic. It is drastic. And for all that they have to do to get from the rebellion ending the Empire, blowing up the Death Star, celebrating on Endor, celebrating on Coruscant, to the First Order reestablishing the Empire, there's a lot that needs to happen. There's a lot that needs to happen. Ultimately, it does come down to, how did the First Order come about? And once that gets figured out, I think the dominoes will start falling in both directions. And the thing with Star Wars is, especially when you're telling stories about something that's in between two movies, is that it's kind of like the ripple effect. What happens here is also going to happen boom and boom. It's not like when George was creating the prequels, like, you knew where you had to get to ultimately, but it's not like he had to do anything before that. He had free reign to do so. Whereas the writers and directors of the sequel trilogy, they had free reign to take the universe post episode 6 and create a new world 20-30 years later. And I feel like it's just a little bit muddled up, and now there's a lot of catching up to do, so to say. You know what I'm saying, Van Seal?
Yeah.
It's super muddled up. Right now I'm just talking about the differences in where we were at the end of episode 6 and the start of episode 7. And how
a big gap.
Yeah, and how so much happened to go from the rebellion winning the war to the First Order, in essence, reestablishing the Empire. Do you have any takes on that?
I have a few. I think my biggest one was, I think that was like, so like, I'm not a fan of the new trilogy by any means. But I will say I do like The Force Awakens. I think The Force Awakens is like a great setup movie. Am I coming in good, or is my audio messed up, or are we good?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. All right. So the one thing I didn't like about the new trilogy was it doesn't explain what is the status quo of the galaxy, because obviously in A New Hope, it's like a brand new landscape, like we don't know what Star Wars is yet. They kind of explain that the Empire is the governing ruler of the galaxy and they're oppressing everyone. It's very clear. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, tell me a story without telling me a story. And I think the First Order, I honestly thought for a second they were just a bunch of space pirates.
Yeah, and I mean,
because I'm like, what is the First Order? It's like it's the Empire Reborn, but it's like, but the Empire's not in control. They're not in control. They're not, they don't have an emperor. They're not running the government. So it's like, okay, you're not in control, but you're going around chasing rebels. The rebels aren't in control. and they're not getting support from the government. So it kind of feels like you have these two like space pirate factions just kind of fighting. And I'm using the word pirate really loosely here. I'm just saying like because the rebels got support from the Alliance and from the New Republic, but the Resistance did not. The Resistance were like legit like boots on the ground rebels.
Yeah.
But the First Order was also not in control. So I was just like what, like, you know, who is the controlling power in the galaxy? And I feel like the Force Awakens did a really poor job at explaining that, because after I watched that movie, I was like, I had so many more questions. I was like,
yep,
like the First Order were able to build this super weapon. If they're not the controlling power, how the hell were we able to get funding for this thing?
Yep.
The Death Star makes sense. It's like they're in charge. They control the money. They're in charge. They do whatever they want. Like that makes sense. First Order, it's just kind of like they're there. They just kind of exist. So I do think there is a lot. Okay, so I feel like when you have these different eras in Star Wars, prequels to original trilogy to the sequels, I feel like things change very rapidly in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because if you look at history, like even like IRL history, like, you know, you don't change, like nations don't change who they're loyal to every 20, 30 years. And that's kind of what's happening with Star Wars. It's kind of weird when you look at it in the scope of things. It's like the Clone Wars was epic and amazing. You know, this awesome like 4 or 5 year confrontation. But then like it just changed overnight to just the Empire. And then the Empire lasted like for what? Like
23 years, 23 years.
So like 2 decades. 2 decades. And then it changes again. And it's just like it changes really rapidly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a problem. It's just like when things change rapidly, you kind of need to like let people know like what's going on. So yeah, there's, like you said, there's a lot of explaining to do about how the Empire turns into the First Order, and they've kind of explained a couple things in some of the books and some of the games. Like Battlefront explains a little bit like where the First Order gets their troops. They get their troops from children that are very young. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that I can see that. It makes sense. It's a little like, you know, junior recruitment program, I guess. Yeah, that was also like one of the big questions too. Like when I watched the original trilogy, like where'd all the stormtroopers come from? You know, like how did that happen? You know, they first start off as clones, and then you have that question of how the clone do, and then you see clones for the first time in the prequels, and you're thinking, are all stormtroopers just clones? And you're like, no, they gotta explain that transition too.
Like literally just sitting here thinking about it, I'm thinking how they could have done The Force Awakens, just the introduction, a bit differently. And I'd maintain some themes. I'd maintain that you open up with the First Order and with the stormtroopers in that, but I would open it up with a rallying cry from I'd use someone that was in the Empire in episode 6, where you have to deep fake them, whatever, and you just do a rally cry like, today's the day that the Empire's reborn, and I would have them perform a siege of some sort of New Republic world, land all those landing crafts, and just infiltrate with a bunch of stormtroopers and walkers. All you got to do, then you can explain like, okay, so the Empire's been away in the unknown regions, and they've just been like compiling Imperial remnants, Imperial castaways, regrouping, re-strengthening, rebolstering, and today's like the new Empire Day 2.0, and they catch the New Republic off guard, and because the New Republic's caught off guard, they got to send in the Resistance Army, and the Resistance Army is even caught off guard because, you know, it's 20, 30 years later. They haven't fought a war. They haven't done anything. The most that they've done is fight off pirates and stuff, you know? So it would be just a little bit of a way to explain like where the First Order came from, because they were just castaway Imperials that met up, got organized, and then decided one day to just fight back. But we never see like the day that they choose to fight back. We never see that. And I feel like with things that big, you can't talk about them outside of the movie. I feel like similar to how in episode 4, when the Empire boards the rebel craft, they should have had something like that where the First Order boards a New Republic, you know, Starfleet or whatever, and they just slaughter all of the New Republic generals and senators and all that.
Or even like so like for me, the scene that like there's a couple scenes that like kind of explain, like I said, you know, like show not tell. And in New Hope, it's like, you know, when you see stormtroopers for the first time in like Tatooine, they're just walking around casually, like they're not shooting people, they're just patrolling.
Yep.
But they're patrolling with authority. The other scene is, you know, when you have all the different Moffs talking in the Death Star. It's like these people are in power, and I feel like with the First Order, you get a little bit of that when Hux and crew are talking to each other. Hux and Kylo, Swigo terms. Dude, Swigo has destroyed my Star Wars vocabulary. He's destroyed that game's destroyed my Star Wars vocabulary. It's insane. No, they're talking about how, like, you know, like, I think the line is something like Kylo's giving Hux a hard time, saying that, like, you know, when Finn defects, he's like, you know, you should have gone with the clone army instead. Are your soldiers capable? So, like, you get context there about, like, where you get your troops, but not enough context where you know what the First Order is, because the First Order and the Empire are completely different. The First Order is the Empire Reborn or the Empire like 2.0, but like they're not the Empire. They're not, because the Empire had so many systems that they would call their home worlds, where like civilians lived there. People grew up there. People grew up in the Empire just because it's like their mom and dad were Imperial, so they were Imperial. So it's like they weren't essentially like bad people or anything. It's just like that's just the world they grew up in, and you know, job opportunities and yada yada. The First Order, I don't feel like they really had that. I feel like the First Order, like I said, like every time you see them, they're either at a base or they're in a ship.
Yeah.
And there's like they you don't really see them mingling with civilians ever in the new trilogy. Like they don't just like walk around patrolling. They're literally just looking for resistance, and it's just like it's just it's kind of odd. I feel like it's kind of odd. You know, hopefully we'll get that context of, you know, how powerful the First Order is exactly. By the time the Force Awakens, or you know, where they've been the whole time, because when Han and Leia talk about them, they talk about them like they're this big threat that's been going on for like a long time. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, like I feel like they've been at the table, right? But we never see when they take control of that table. You know what I mean? Because I know that they were, the Imperial Remnant was, and we kind of get this in Mando season 3. They were trying to get a place in the Senate. And I think that Imperial Remnant is the First Order. Because I don't think that they are trying to bring back the Empire. But I mean, feel like it's just a bit of a different vibe to it.
Because I'm a fan of the Imperial Remnant just because that is something from old canon. But like, I don't know, I'm just like, you know, like the second we started making these connections from these live action shows that like eventually we are leading to episode 7, it's like the closer we get to it, the less excited I get, just because I'm like I'm not a fan of the First Order. But I don't know. I mean, I always hope that maybe they're gonna retcon the sequel trilogy.
Well, I mean, I don't think it needs to be retconned, but it like I was saying earlier, it just needs a lot to make sense.
That's the problem with it. It needs a lot to make sense, and then like,
and that's the issue with it is.
And then the other thing is we're not seeing Han, Luke, and Leia in any of these shows, and I get it. actors have passed away. I get that, and people are older, but I'm like, just recast them at this point.
Yes, I agree. I think the
Just
dude
recast
who
it.
I
Get
never
past the
remember his
whole
name.
to get past the whole you're not my Han Solo, you're not my Luke. It's like, and then people are complaining about where's Han and Luke. It's like, well, which is it? Which one do you want? I'm like, I feel like if you recast them, it'd be fine.
Yeah, Alden Ehrenreich, the guy who played Han.
He did great in Solo. God, and he's such a good actor too. He was in Oppenheimer too.
Yeah, and he was so good as Han Solo. I don't know who the kid was that played Luke.
A lot of people want Bucky to play Luke.
Did you see the guy that was actually under his face though?
Yeah, he had a cameo in I think Mando season 2. Or it was Book of Boba. It was Book of Boba. It was when Mando was testing out his new fighter. He was he was the other pilot that pulled him over.
Yeah, there was that guy, but there was a different dude.
Oh, there's another one? A second one?
In Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, and he legit. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks just like him.
I'm gonna post it in general so you can see it. But literally.
Sure. I mean,
look, they put dots on his face. Take the dots away. You don't need it. It's Luke Skywalker.
Dude, you just need to give him some hair. You just need to give him the hairpiece.
And they did.
That's incredible.
And they did, yeah. He was doing everything. He was doing everything.
And I'm like, if you want to do something to meet the fans in the middle kind of a thing, then just cast Carrie Fisher's daughter as Leia.
Yeah, that as well.
That'd be fine. And I think that'd be a nice homage to her character.
Yeah, Sebastian Stan could also. That's the guy who played Bucky.
Bucky. Yeah. Sebastian Stan is Luke. Yeah, because he just looks like Luke, and I'm like, but he's getting up there in age. But I'm like, yeah, he's not Mark Hamill's age though. So,
I think at this rate, with everything going on, the thing that I want to happen is to just do what you can to do right by the characters. Because that's all that matters at the end of the day, is doing right by the characters. You know, I feel like Luke, Han, and Leia to a degree. I mean, Leia got the most buffs out of the sequel trilogy. We learned that she was a Jedi. We learned that she was because we always knew that she was Force sensitive. We didn't know how strong that she was.
Right.
But we get to see her use the Force. We get to see her as a Jedi. Han, like I said at the beginning of the pod, he kind of got subjugated to being a comedy character in Episode 7. Because that was I
saw more Harrison Ford than I did Han Solo.
Yeah, and that was really the only role for Han in the movie, because we had to take Finn serious. We had to take Rey serious. We had to take Ben serious. And Poe wasn't really a comedy character yet. He was more of a...
he was supposed to die at the beginning of Episode 7, but he begged J.J. Abrams saying, hey, I always get killed off in my films. Can I be alive for this one? I'm like, sure. Which, I mean, honestly, his character... and I'm not trashing his performance, because Oscar Isaacs isn't fantastic, but, I feel like if you could have taken Poe out of every single movie, and it would have been the same.
See, maybe this is just me, but Poe was one of my favorite parts of the movies.
Oh no, I'm not saying I don't like him. I liked him. Because he probably because he didn't make things worse. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying the magnitude of his part was
okay.
I liked him, but I'm like, if we removed him from every movie, it would not matter.
Yeah. But yeah, Han was the comedy guy until he died, and then Episode 8 we kick it off with Poe, who's the new Han Solo, the new comedy guy.
Yes.
And he's making mom jokes, but I'll talk about that more when we get to The Last Jedi. But to wrap up The Force Awakens, I came out of that movie theater with high hopes. I felt like it was a really good film. I loved how they kind of just broke us down, told us what was going to happen, and we had our new characters to follow. We had our Kylo Ren, who, to me, I know this is a hot take, but for me, Kylo's the main character of the sequels.
No, I agree too, because when I left the theater, I was like, Kylo got more screen time than any main villain in the original or prequel trilogy.
Yeah, and I think that could also be why it's such a like weird film for people, is because the main character is quote unquote the bad guy. But similar to episode 4, Darth Vader.
He's barely in it though in episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, their stories are nearly like Kylo and Darth Vader's stories are nearly identical.
Well, I'll be honest. The Disney think tank hasn't been really putting out what it should be past couple of years. But I always tell people, I think The Force Awakens is like the perfect alley-oop, the perfect setup.
Yep.
And then the next one,
and then we get the last
Jedi is like the worst, like the most epic. Just you missed it. It was there. You didn't have to do anything. You just had to put the ball in the hoop.
Yeah, with The Last Jedi, I mean, I came out of the theaters hyped and like just absolute gas, and I thought it was great. But I thought, you know, when I really thought about it, it was good on accident. There were things about it that were good on accident. And there were...
That's not a good sign.
Exactly. Like, Rian Johnson as a writer is often carried by his actors' portrayals of the characters more than the depth of the characters that he writes. And we've seen that with a lot of his films. But to stay in universe, I really enjoyed parts of the portrayals from characters that we got to see. And we got to see a lot of new, cool things about the Force, about the galaxy, about what's going on. But my biggest takeaway was that they shouldn't have killed Snoke.
100%. That was the first thing I thought of. One, when it happened, like I couldn't even enjoy that fight scene because my brain was going a million miles like an hour, because I was like, this happened a movie early.
Yes, that's exactly what I was feeling.
I left The Force Awakens saying, oh, Kylo and Rey are going to team up like Vader and Luke versus the Emperor against Snoke, and then they're going to fight Snoke in episode 9 and beat him. I'm like, that. I'm calling it. I called it. But it happened a movie early, and I was so confused when I left the theater, because then I was like, now what? That's so weird. I'm like who's in charge now? Is it Kylo? Is it Hux? Like, because that's just weird, because back then, we still don't know what the First Order is. I'm like, I don't know if they control the galaxy. I don't know what they are. They're a terrorist group. They're pirates. I don't know. Don't know what the hell they are.
Essentially,
their leaders,
to like, if we have to put a name on it, they're a militia.
Right, but like, what is their objective or goal other than to hunt the Resistance?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see them conquering planets. I don't see them like building anything. Like, I guess the Starkiller base.
I want to bring up Hux's speech.
Hux's speech in the first one was great. After the Force Awakens, they ruined that character for me. I was like, yeah, I can get behind him. He's like a younger Tarkin. I get it. But no, where was I going with this? I was saying that like when Snoke died, I was like, we still don't even know who the hell Snoke was.
Yep.
That was so weird to me. Like, why would you kill a character off without the Last Jedi creates so many loopholes, and I called this after I saw that movie. I said episode 9 is going to be full of exposition and explaining what happened, because The Last Jedi did so many things that were weird and that weren't supposed to happen yet, to the point where if you watch like the first 20 or 30 minutes of the Rise of Skywalker, they just explain all the loopholes. Like they even had to explain the Holdo maneuver. They're like, that's a one. It's like there's so many weird things that happen in that movie where like they literally had to waste time explaining stuff from a previous film. So.
Yep.
That upset me because I was like, great. So now you're taking time away from this film just so they can explain what the hell happened in the last film, and hopefully the audience accepts it while we're still trying to tell a story for the current film. And I'm just like, it's just. And I knew that going into episode 9. I was like, yeah, it's kind of a. Like I said, episode 7, perfect setup. Episode 8, totally botched, and episode 9's trying to, like, you're trying to patch all the holes while also trying to tell a story at the same time. I'm like, it's just. I guess do the best you can at that point. I don't know.
Yeah, and while we're on episode 8, I feel like one of the bigger negatives of episode 8 was just like they took this character that was super important. He was the first character that we ever saw in a trailer. He was in the last fight scene, and they took Finn off this pedestal, off of this, here, care about this character for 2 hours. He's important to the story. He's important to the conflict with our main character. Take this character, this former stormtrooper that left the First Order. Take this traitor who just joins the rebels and don't care about him anymore because he's not important.
Yeah, no, Finn was super interesting, and I thought the idea of his character was unique and original, for one.
Yeah.
And I thought it had potential. I was like, this could be kind of cool. Like, I'm kind of digging it. But then, yeah, you're right. They totally just tossed him to the side.
And this is going to sound crazy, if Finn was allowed to sacrifice himself, blow up the battering ram, which would then cause a chain reaction, blow up all those ships and walkers, I think Finn
would redeem his character.
It would 1000% redeem his character, because in essence he gave his life to destroy the very life that he came from. You know, how deep of an arc is that? And then you go into episode 9 and then you're actually fighting for something. You don't want Finn's sacrifice to be in vain.
Yeah.
And I felt like they just took such a terrible route. All to say, stupid. We're not fighting for hate. We're fighting for who we love. Terrible.
20 yards in front of AT-ATs staring at them.
Yeah, just I wanted Finn to die, but for all the right reasons. And
yeah,
I mean, he, like, that in and of itself was one of the things that really brought me down on the movie. I could theoretically understand why Luke Skywalker was the way he was. I could theoretically understand it, but again, they didn't explain it.
Because he saw the future of the trilogy.
They could have done so much, man. They could have introduced Mara Jade, like maybe Mara died. A chain reaction of Mara dying, Ben destroying his order, killing his students, the burden of the death of his students, like that in and of itself I could get, you know. Even Mara dying, their kids dying.
We don't even see his reaction about Han. All we hear him say is, "Where's Han?" And then the scene cuts to, like, I think Ben. It's like we don't even see his reaction to Han dying, and they considered each other best friends. Yep,
and Luke, who in episode 6, like, you see the edge to Luke. He always wants to protect his friends. And they didn't explain that Luke, when he's looking into Ben's mind, we don't see what he sees, but Luke can literally see the future. That's one of his powers. I think that Luke saw Ben kill Han, who's his best friend, his brother-in-law. He fought a war with this guy. He saved the galaxy with this guy. And for a split second, he wanted to kill the guy that was going to kill his best friend. But then he remembered, like, crap, this is my nephew. I can't do this. That's why I think it was on accident, because there's no fucking shot that Rian Johnson intended that. But
I did not like
in,
the flashbacks, because that's actually that's the first Star Wars movie where we ever get flashbacks.
Yeah, and they did 3 of them,
and they were the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the style of flashback they're doing, because it's like every time you watch it, it's a little bit different with like minor details changed because you're getting someone else's perspective. I get that. We're not watching a fucking detective movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't buy the whole Luke goes to the dark side for like a second. Like, I really don't, because I'm just like, it just...
No,
like,
it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
And there's
it goes
ways
back
to
to, like,
explain
the point,
it while
the point I was saying
maintaining the
earlier.
integrity of Luke's character.
Yeah. And like I said, things change very rapidly in Star Wars, but like, that's way too fast.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, him just saying, like, I need to kill... Like, that just isn't Luke. Like, the fact that he wouldn't even try talking to Ben about it or anything, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not Luke at all.
No, it's really not. But the issue is, it is Luke, because he did it. And
yeah.
you can't... The thing that's tricky is you can't ask, like, you can't say he wouldn't do that, because he did it. Now you have to theorize why he did it. And for that, I think you just have to put into perspective, okay, what does Luke hold sacred to him? It's his friends and his family. You see that in Empire Strikes Back when he quits training to go and save them because they're going to die. And he learns that he needs to be patient with this. Well, he had a slip up because he wasn't patient with it, and he ignited his lightsaber, which...
I don't even remember which version of the flashback is true.
It's the one where he pulls out his lightsaber, ignites
But
it.
He's looking at it, right?
He's looking at his lightsaber, and then when he looks down, Ben's looking at him. Okay. Now, if they gave the context that Snoke was... and they said that Snoke was seducing him. They didn't say how he was seducing him. They could have said Snoke was in his mind. If they gave that context, because you get that context in a comic, but you don't get it in the movie, again, you can't rely on comics and outside media.
That's another reason. That's another reason I didn't like the sequel trilogies. Like, they give the audience homework. They're like, oh, if you want to know what's going on, you have to read these books, those comics, and watch these shows. It's like, no one's got time for that. Just explain shit.
Mm-hmm. And literally all they needed to do in that flashback was show the clip of Ben killing Han. And all of it makes sense. But they left it up for interpretation because they didn't know. Rian Johnson didn't write. He didn't know what Luke saw. But he just needed to get Luke from point A to point B, and he did it as like C-, just getting a passing grade as possible.
I wouldn't even give it a C-. I'd fail that dude. Just because, like, we see this same pattern in what they're doing with the other Star Wars show. So you have Luke, a guy that's depressed, old. He has to rediscover himself and what makes him good in the first place. Like, we don't need that, because George Lucas already showed what makes his character great in the first place. And then the same thing with Obi-Wan in the Obi-Wan show, and they did the same thing with Boba Fett in the Boba Fett show. It's literally like they just like to make these, like, their main characters that are men, coincidence, you know, depressed, they're old, they're run down, they're like, they have to rediscover who they are. It's like, why do we have to do this? This is like a waste of time, and it's not good storytelling.
Here's another thing I've never even thought about, right? Episode 7, we don't know that Luke is feeling those things, right?
No, we don't, because they just look at each other, he takes his cloak off, and he just gives her a stare like, who are you? Yeah,
and this is what makes sense to me. Luke, why else would he leave a map behind him if he wasn't looking for something with the intention of coming back? But it was someplace dangerous that he had to get to, right? I'm thinking Luke went to the Jedi, the sacred Jedi Island, to just get re-enlightened with the Force. But Rian Johnson perceives it as he's hermiting himself. Luke's X-Wing was literally in the drip, you know?
With a full tank of gas, apparently.
Yeah, and you can explain it that Luke crash landed and his X-Wing is totaled. Like there's no shot. He'll never be able to fly it anymore. That's why he's stuck there. That's why he left a map, just in case something like that happened. And before anything happened, like, they needed to get the completed part of the map because it was split up to protect Luke. Because if it got into the wrong hands, then that would be it. That'd be wraps. The Jedi would be over.
You just made it sound like Luke, like, took a trip out to the desert, his GPS died, and he's out of gas. Like,
Yeah.
It just sounds like...
And I think that would make
honestly,
a lot more sense than
I prefer
Luke
that
being a
over
hermit.
I prefer that over what they did with him, honestly. Like, it's just...
Yeah, because he was... Like, Luke literally never leaves that island. Ever.
No, he doesn't.
It's his Force ghost
sad.
that does. And if Rey brings Luke back, can he perform that ultimate sacrifice? Yes, of course he can. But would that have been more impactful if Luke Skywalker is fighting Ben, fighting the whole First Order, a full power, not prime, but like an aged vet Luke taking on the First Order by himself while the rest of the Resistance is escaping? Does that mean more than Luke hollow projecting himself?
Yes.
Yes, 100%, because then his death means something.
When I first saw episode 8 for the first time, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know he was hollow projecting. I knew something was wrong because he had his blue saber.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we literally just saw the thing blow up like 5 minutes ago.
Yep.
Like, you can't tell me that he either has a spare or, you know, he put it together. It's like, we just saw it blow up.
And there's no reason for him to have even had that. Like, we never even see his green lightsaber in action.
Nope.
So that's another reason why I'm stealing it in my book. But the Last Jedi, like I said, it was accidentally good in some cases. But
there's some parts I liked, I will admit. Like, and when I say some parts, I'm probably talking about less than 10 minutes of screen time, but I don't know. I try not to make sense of the new trilogy because it just doesn't make any.
Yeah, and
for the most part.
Each movie is kind of in its own vacuum because they don't go into each other. They don't really add up. But when you look at the characters, right? Rey has such accelerated growth in the Force. And it does make sense to me because the Force is always trying to balance itself out. So in essence, the Force kind of gave Rey steroids. And because Rey needed to match up with the dark side of the Force, right? So people saying that, like, Rey got these Force powers out of nowhere, like, they were always there. And this is explained because she said, something in me has always been there, but only now, like, it's awake. And she gets taught by Luke, who's the most powerful MFer of all time. And the Force is really just trying to balance itself out. So they're giving Rey this accelerant, which doesn't get explained, but it's kind of just up for the interpretation of the audience. Rey goes on to be like she really is the last Jedi. And it's not just in the name of the movie, but it's also in the name of hope. Like, she is the last hope. And I feel like that should have been the title of the movie. Not The Last Jedi, but The Last Hope. Because, like you said, it was a movie too late with everything that happened. And I feel like everything that happened with Snoke, with Kylo, with the throne room, that should have been in the last movie. But everything that happened on Crate should have happened in this movie. And we can get that explanation. Then with the last movie, they could decide whether or not Ben should redeem himself or not redeem himself. But
I mean, like if I can control time and space and I could like, you know, get rid of movies, I would only get rid of episode 8 and 9. I actually genuinely like episode 7 because, like I said, it just sets up for a lot of things. And Rey is not as powerful as she ends up becoming, which I think is a big problem for a lot of people, is how she's just good at everything somehow.
Well,
But
she's not
if we
good
let-
at everything, but she can do a lot because you see, like, she does a lot of things on accident.
Yeah, and I think that bothers a lot of people.
Like, even with her saber combat, she really only beats Ben because he stops, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's not good, and it's kind of the fallacy of any guy with two hands has a fighting chance.
Well, so
Anyone
I
swinging
just
a
don't
saber's
like.
got a shot.
I mean, like you said, she has 4 steroids, and they don't explain that. But like, I just feel like she got like not even the bare minimum of training. You know what I mean? Like, I would have liked to seen her train a little bit more, and work up and kind of earn that like status of super Jedi, because I feel like she trains for all of like 2 days, and she's like, all right, I know how to be a Jedi. I took the accelerated course, like, you know what I mean? And then the Jedi texts, those weren't even used for anything. Like, she never studied them or read them. She just kind of like, she's like, I took
She
my
read the
textbooks.
hell out of them, but it was in between 8 and 9.
Right. So, yeah,
Again,
going
off
back to, like I
screen.
said, like, yeah. So, again, you're giving your audience homework it's just like, but and most people, probably 90% of people that went and saw these movies, did not read those books or watch those comics.
Nope.
So it's like, you know, it's just, like I said, I wish I would love to lead wherever these shows are going with Ahsoka and all that. If it goes into episode 7, that'd be cool. But like, if they could just like redo 8 and 9, I think that'd be great. Like, I don't know, I don't know what it is. Like 8 and 9, I just feel like 8 just blows everything up, and then 9's just playing damage control. And then
That's exactly what I was about to say. Like, 9 kind of had to, because I feel I really want to see what J.J. Abrams episode 8 looked like. You know?
Oh, have you seen the original script for episode 9?
No.
Dude, it's sick. It's so sick.
I'll look into that. And
there's someone animated the entire thing too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's a little different, but it's a little bit of it feels more like Return of the Jedi. It's like a slower pace, darker tone, but like I think it's better than what they gave us.
Oh, of course. I mean, I liked The Rise of Skywalker because it had a job to do, and I feel like it did the job, right? It did the best that it could with its circumstances.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I saw it. So I think it's as good as it was ever gonna get.
Yeah, because The Force Awakens, we're playing chess. The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson decides he's not smart enough to play chess, so he plays checkers with the chess pieces. And then J.J. Abrams comes back and he's like, "Why is my game all fucked up?" Oh, he was playing checkers.
Pretty much.
And that's how I feel like it was. I'll never understand nor forgive them for breaking up the trilogy. I feel like it should have been written by one vision, you know? And like I said earlier in the pod, I feel like they were fan fictions done by people who were not Star Wars fans.
Agreed.
And with The Last Jedi, you see that. Like, you could tell Rian Johnson didn't like Luke Skywalker. You could tell just in how he was written. He was a grumpy old man. For what? That's how you interpret why he was on the island? Cool. Then just tell me you don't care. Tell me you don't care without telling me that you don't care. And that's how he made The Last Jedi. And it sucked.
There was a movie poster I saw. It wasn't a movie poster. It was just a regular Star Wars poster I saw. And it made no sense to me. It made literally no sense. And I was like, what in the world is this? And it was the sequel, the prequel, and the original trilogy, like main characters, like the trios. So in the prequels, you have Obi-Wan, you have Anakin, and you got Padme. Okay. Yep. That's your kind of like your trio there. In the original trilogy, obviously Han, Luke, Leia. And then for the Force Awakens, it was, I'm not for the Force, sorry, excuse me, sequel trilogy. It was Rey, Finn, and Poe. This was like after, this was post episode 7. Like episode 8 hasn't come out yet. And I'm like, why is Poe standing next to Rey? They haven't even met yet.
Yeah.
They don't meet till literally the credits of episode 8. I'm like, that's
True.
how disconnected they were on writing this, because I'm like, your new trio that we're supposed to fall in love with, you don't even have them in a single shot together yet.
Nope.
It blows my mind. I'm like literally 2 of your main characters meet for the first time at the credits of the second out of 3 movies. I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, could you imagine Han and Luke not interacting for like a whole 2 movies, or like Obi-Wan and Padme not meeting till episode 3?
Because it wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't make any sense.
And yeah, I never even thought about it like that. Like, they legitimately don't meet yet. Poe,
and all they say is, "Hi, I'm Poe. Hi, I'm Rey." I'm like, that is the worst. Like, that's the worst thing to say right before the credits roll. It's like, what is that?
yeah, and like, Poe is literally one of the most important people in the Resistance. He's literally one of the most important people. He's their operative. He's their best fighter. And Rey is also one of the most important people in the Resistance because she's the Jedi.
Yeah.
So
and then they never meet.
yeah.
I never would have thought of that unless I saw that poster, and I was like, wait, something looks weird about this poster. And I was like,
yeah.
why are they standing next to each other? They've never met. Like, what the hell's that all about?
And yeah, that's another thing. 7 and 8. Even in episode 8, everyone's doing their own thing, you know?
Yep.
And everyone's got this weird conflict. Rey is off with Luke. Finn is with
And
Rose
Vegas.
Tico on Canto Bite.
Yeah.
Poe is beefing with Holdo. Kylo is beefing with Hux. Also beefing with Snoke. Also very pissed off at Rey because Rey won't join him.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself, I enjoy Kylo's episode 8. Kylo's episode 8, if there's one good takeaway, Kylo's episode 8 is sick because it's realistic. No one has just one thing that's holding them back, you know? Everyone's got like a couple things. Like work sucks.
Adam
School's
Driver
got me
carries
busy.
hard.
He's such a good actor.
Carries so hard. Yeah. I didn't like him as much in The Force Awakens, but yeah, you're right. Like episode 8 Kylo is great. Episode 9 I feel like isn't as strong as 8 in my opinion, but still episode 9 Kylo's pretty solid.
Yeah. He carried. That's safe to say. That's very safe to say. And the thing that really sucked, the last thing I'll say that sucked about the Force Awakens or the Last Jedi. Do you remember all the speculation and all the theories about Snoke and all that?
Yep.
And they just kill him off. They troll the fans by saying your Snoke theories suck. And it's like, sure, you don't always want to do fan service, but at the end of the day, like, don't just murder it, because the Snoke stuff, Rey's parents, and
I know, man. They backtrack on so many things because, like I said, episode 9 is literally damage control of the movie.
Yeah,
And
like
then
Rey was
the
meant
one
to be
thing-
a Kenobi.
I remember the one big marketing thing, and this was in every trailer. You hear Ben saying, "Let the past die." Like we're gonna get rid of all the old stuff. Like that's like I don't know if it's metaphoric at all, but they're just like talking about how they want to write the new generation of Star Wars, and you have characters literally saying, "Let the past die. Forget the Jedi. Forget the Sith." Yada yada yada. And then what do they do in episode 9? It's just they try doing fan service and they bring the OG villain back. They bring back all this other iconic stuff. They bring Han back, and it's just like, you know, they can't even get their own story straight.
Correct. And they tried to use the nostalgia as a way to drive moments. And I feel like they were trying to create moments rather than create stories.
Yep.
Because you
100%.
see that when they introduce the Millennium Falcon on Jakku, you hear do 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 do. You don't need to use the Millennium Falcon there.
Nope.
I get it, and it's a cool way to reintroduce something, but you kind of just get hit with so much nostalgia at once, only for all that nostalgia to be taken out at the end of the day. You know, Han and Chewie come back, and I think, less than a half hour later, Han's dead. So,
Yep.
It's tough. And with The Last Jedi, they kind of did the exact same thing. Like, okay, we're going to introduce Luke. Luke's back. Luke's back, baby. He's on the front of the poster, but it's not the same Luke that you knew. It is not Luke Skywalker. It's not the hopeful Jedi. It's not the guy that would face up against the entire Empire just to save his family. It's not the guy that would go toe-to-toe with Darth Vader, even though he hasn't finished his training. No, it's just a guy on an island.
And then 30 minutes later, he's dead.
Yep. With, like, the worst death of any main... Luke, prior to episode 7 and 8, was the greatest hero of all time.
Yeah.
And he had the worst death of any hero I've ever seen, because it didn't mean much.
Anything. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
it meant that the Resistance got to escape, but like, there's better ways to do it, and we already detailed and outlined a way to do it, and it hurt me. It hurt me.
yeah, I got in so many arguments about people trying to defend it, saying that the Force put so much strain on his body that he just died. I'm like, I've never seen that happen to anybody in Star Wars history. Like, I've played the Old Republic for, 5-6 years. I've played, read so many books. I've never heard of, like, you pull a Force muscle and die. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, but if he's supposed to be the greatest Jedi, that should not be happening, or maybe he should have stretched. I don't know.
Like I said, I think he just isn't a Star Wars fan, wasn't a fan of Luke, and interpreted things the complete wrong way. But then we get into The Rise of Skywalker, and like you said, it's just a lot of damage control. And it's like, when you're working for a company and the CEO is sending dick pics to the secretary, and you're the PR agent, like, you got to be on top of that. And I feel like J.J. Abrams did the best he could to get on top of it. Like, the CEO is a great guy, he donates to charity, but
I mean, I feel like they had two options. The first option was the one they went with, explain everything that happened, try to make everything make sense, or you double down, ignore everything that happened, and actually try to tell a good story.
How you doing? How you doing? Who's that?
Me.
Yeah. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Awesome. You having a good day?
Mhm.
Hanging out with Grandma?
Mhm.
What are you guys doing? No, you don't have to. It's okay.
No, they're very cool. They're big boy and they have tractors and trucks.
Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
See, how you doing?
How you doing?
Awesome.
It's cute.
Go play with Grandma.
Sissy's coming over to you.
Oh, it's a kitty.
Yeah, she. You can see her belly.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So with the rise of Skywalker, right? It's just a bad PR.
Yes, pretty much, man. I mean, it's like you know, just like it's just failed promises after failed promises. Because like, I know we're done with episode 8, but I remember like they marketed that the Knights of Ren were going to have an incredible role in this film. That we were going to see them in action, just instead of just seeing them, and then not really. Same thing with Captain Phasma. I remember them marketing.
We haven't
the
even talked
actress.
about her yet, bro.
We don't have to. I mean, honestly, like that's probably the one thing that Rise of Skywalker did right. They didn't bring her back just to kill her off again. Because I was like, man, what a joke of a character. And I remember when the Force Awakens came out. Not just to backtrack a little bit, but I think this will add context to the conversation. I thought this was really interesting. So that Christmas, the number one returned item that Christmas, like Christmas presents, people returning gifts that they don't want. The number one returned item was Star Wars merchandise that year.
Was it?
2015, 2016 January. Yeah. It was. They were talking about on the news that like Star Wars was the number one like IP for kids, kids toys that was returned, and I was like, that's super interesting. However, the number one selling Star Wars character was not BB-8. It was actually Captain Phasma. If it was a shirt, action figure, whatever, and people were all hyped for her. But anyways, I thought that was super interesting, and going forward, actually, now I look back at it, when those movies came out, I never bought any merch, I never bought any collectibles, figures, nothing from anything past episode 7. I was just kind of like, I don't know. But yeah, just a lot of failed promises. Captain Phasma was gonna be a bigger role, Knights of Ren are gonna be a bigger role. Not really. They're just kind of there. They're there, but they're not there.
I don't think I did. I have a few Funkos. Those
But like,
came out
let me
a
ask
lot
you this:
later.
did you buy as much or close to what you bought when the prequels were in theaters?
Definitely less, because I was a kid when prequels were in theaters.
Sure, but I mean, it's still Star Wars, and it's like, I don't know. I have a couple things from episode 7, but I'm like, I mean, when I say couple, I mean probably like 2 or 3. But I mean, it's like episode 9. Yeah, I felt like episode 9 was just this big scavenger hunt of PR stuff, man.
And they made really marketable stuff. A crossguard lightsaber, a mask for Kylo, new stormtrooper masks, red troopers, Phasma, Rey lightsaber, which inevitably just was Anakin's, but hey ho, front row. Funkos, and like they made a lot of really cool stuff. Issue is with Disney especially, they're a little bit late to get everything out. And I remember this at the theaters. My friend's mom had a printing company. And I walked into The Last Jedi with a Last Jedi poster on a t-shirt. And people were like, holy shit, like, where'd you get that? What the hell is that? Like, that's so cool. And this was early doors of Amazon being like a superpower, 2017. Amazon wasn't huge, but certain people had it. So people were asking me, did you get that on Amazon? Like, where'd you get that? And that in and of itself, it's like, you should probably have stuff ready to rumble when you're releasing a movie. You know what I mean?
I mean, I remember when episode 1 was coming to theaters that, I mean, I was little. I think I was maybe like 5 or 6 when episode 1 was coming out. But I mean, I remember waiting out in line at Toys R Us for the midnight release of the figures, and the movie wasn't even out yet for a couple months. And it was like a frenzy. I think I was the only kid there. It was a bunch of adults that were like, episode 1, gotta get Darth Maul. It's all everybody wanted. And as many battle droids as you can get your hands on. but yeah, you're right. Like it's there was not really a desire. I feel like the merchandise really hit them. I feel like that's probably where they lost most of their money. Not just from ticket sales in the theater, but just merch.
Yeah, and the lack of
And I think they're stepping on their own toes because you know, when the prequels came out, I'm sorry, let's go back. When the original trilogy came out, Star Wars was the movie to see for the year. Doesn't matter which one. Everyone changed cinema somehow. It was a milestone for cinema. It was a milestone for just movies, entertainment in general. When the prequels came out, you had like Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi, the Sony ones. So it's like you had some competition, but you know, the internet wasn't also prevalent back then. Now you have streaming services, you have Marvel, you have DC, and I feel like with the amount of content that's pushed out there, Star Wars is competing against like 10 times the amount of IPs that they used to. Mm-hmm. And I think Disney just assumed that they looked at Star Wars' numbers from back then and just assumed, oh, if we do this, it's easy money. And I just feel like, you know, unless you put out a good product, which I don't think they did, I think their product is very mediocre. You know, people aren't going to look at it because there's so many other choices. There's so many other IPs and so many other movies and choices now. So you really have to make sure if you're putting out Star Wars, it is a banger.
It has to be. It really does, because merch isn't going to carry your profits anymore, you know?
No.
Merch is only going to come because we live in such a subscription-y era that merch is only going to come if you're delivering. Like if I get gifted something, this is what's cute about friends and family, right? They know I'm a huge Star Wars guy. They always give me something Star Wars-ish for like celebrations like Christmas or my birthday or something.
Nice, yeah.
It's always Mandalorian stuff, though, you know? It's always got Grogu on it. And
yeah.
Everyone knows all my homies hate Grogu. So, but I appreciate the sentiment because they're trying to relate to me and be sweet. These days, though, I wouldn't... Well, my point is, I wouldn't go out and get myself Mandalorian merch because I'm not a fan of the overall totality product. Ahsoka, though, there was a really dope shirt. There was 2 dope shirts at Hot Topic today because I went to the mall before the live stream. There was a Chopper, like, classic college tee that had, like, the nice classic college tee font, and it said Chopper across of it, and it just looks sick. And then there was an Ahsoka, like, old school 80s style retro
I think I've seen that one. Yeah, that one looks really sick.
And I was gonna pick that up, but I needed to get other stuff, and I had priorities. I'm going on vacation in a week, so maybe afterwards, but I had priorities. But it was sick, and I was like, yeah, I'll get this. I love the show. I love the character. But that's what it boils down to. Like, you're only gonna be getting these merch sales from investment when people are invested in your product. That's why Baby Yoda was like the number one entity, not just toy, number one entity in America. Bumper stickers, window decals, backpacks, toys, dolls.
I wish we had that same result when episode 7 came out, though.
Yeah, 100%.
I think they...
And that's what I was getting to. We didn't get that with the sequel trilogy.
We did not.
Not one bit.
And you know, if you think about all the Hasbro toys they made, like I'll talk a lot of the people I talk to, you know, when I was still going to school, like either college professors or other peers, like, you know, you either have to be either in your mid to, you know, late 20s, I think, to enjoy Star Wars, because I feel like a lot of kids these days just aren't into Star Wars. Like, am I crazy for saying that, or like?
I think there's just so much else.
Yeah, there's so much else. Like, they know what Star Wars is, but they're not going to go and buy toys.
There's Twitch, there's YouTube. That stuff wasn't really around when we were watching Star Wars growing up, you know?
Right.
And I think that's going to take precedent. And A, kids don't play outside as much.
Nope.
B, I've worked with kids, you know. Imaginations aren't what they used to be either, because all their free time is spent connected to the internet. So imagination's not really what it was. So no one's really make-believing, like, oh, I'll be Anakin, you be Obi-Wan, and we'll duel. Like, me and my brother used to do that all the time. Kids aren't doing that these days. They're staying indoors. They're on their electronics. And I think that is the magic of Star Wars, you know, thinking that, oh, I can be these characters. I can be part of this. I see myself in this character. Nowadays, like, Star Wars really isn't, and it's the George Lucas effect, because George Lucas had this magic. That's why he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He was able to create characters that people could resonate with.
Everybody could connect with. Everyone could connect to.
Anybody could.
Even before Hollywood started pushing, like, you know, having strong female roles, like, he did that with Leia.
And not just Leia, with American Graffiti, with THX 1738, like he did, or 1138.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He wrote strong female leads. He wrote strong, diverse characters. He literally, like, created aliens
without pushing any like political agendas either.
Exactly.
Which is, like, it's crazy to think about that that's even possible these days. But
he created a world where there's no racism, surrounded by 26 sentient beings, sentient species, like. And I love the world of Star Wars because, like, a black person, an Asian person, a white person, they're just humans.
Yeah, the Empire's gonna hate you all the same. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. And I think that it's nice to have those movies, because I will, like, my missus, she won't enjoy how much, like, Star Wars I show our kids. I already want to name our kids Anakin and Ahsoka, but she's not having it. She's not having it. I'm trying to trick her and be like, oh, can we name him Hayden or Liam or any of the real names of the characters? Not Liam. She wants to name it Liam. But where I'm getting at,
just go with
there's themes.
Firm scissor punch.
There's themes in Star Wars that every kid needs to see, and it's themes of hope. It's themes of redemption. It's themes of you can be a good person no matter what mistakes that you make. And it's themes of family. Yeah. And the one thing that I needed as a kid was hope, because I grew up in a house that wasn't a home. And I needed to see that no matter what, there's always going to be good in my father, because I didn't know that growing up. So that's what Star Wars gave to me, and that's what Star Wars needs to do, and it's not doing that. Star Wars at this point really is just they're Disney fan films, you know, and they're doing their best. And that's why I so love Dave Filoni and what he's done, because he is telling George Lucas Star Wars, you know. He's giving me those vibes and those themes, and he's doing that with characters that he's creating. Like, he created Ahsoka Tano, he created Baylan Skoll, he created Shin Hati. He's created all these magnificent characters to get across what he's trying to tell us. And man, like, he is single-handedly my favorite director, my favorite writer. And if I could give the keys to the kingdom to try and fix the sequels, I'd give him to Dave Filoni.
You know, he also worked on Avatar.
The Last Airbender? Or the
show,
blue one?
The show.
Okay.
No, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, he worked on, like, the good, not the movie, but like the show, the critically acclaimed. Yeah, he also worked on that too. That was actually what he was working on before he did Clone Wars. And I'm like, dude, this guy's resume is, like, insane.
I hated that blue movie. Me and my missus make fun of it all the time.
It's just Pocahontas. It's
just
visually, I'm like, it's impressive.
Any movie can be good visually, with the right budget, you know.
Still bad CGI these days, but yeah.
Like, Everyone always says, "Oh, Ryan Johnson's The Last Jedi was the best visual Star Wars." Okay, so it's the cinematographers.
Like,
He
there's
gets
some pretty
he gets the
shots,
credit.
but the story is shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but you can make a piece of shit look as pretty as you want. It's still a piece of shit.
All right, so if you had to define the sequels in one paragraph to someone that's never seen them before, just finished episode 6, describe it for me.
Oh man, I would say that
And say you
are
were
we being
working.
serious or am I tongue in cheek?
You are the PR agent for Star Wars.
Boy. See, because I work in PR, so this is like worse.
Yep.
I the hell you do this? I would say that, you know, this is the best of your favorite characters, and this is you know, this is the future of Star Wars, and it's all been planned out, and you're gonna get a sneak peek of the future of Star Wars as we approach it through all the live action shows, or something to that effect. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to explain it, because it's like, it's hard to explain what the prequels are, because you don't even get to know who Rey is until like the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine if
Oh, we didn't even talk about the Rey Skywalker stuff. How do you feel about that?
That was added last minute. That was added 100% last minute. Like, I originally was majoring in cinematography before I switched, but when I saw that, you know, the happy ending with all the main characters at the end, and then the camera like dips out, and then the shot attachment, I'm like, oh, this was 100% added after they finished filming. Because there's also an interview, and I'm surprised these interviews like didn't get like erased from the internet's like history or whatever. But there's an interview when they're asking Daisy Ridley. They kind of tricked her. I felt kind of bad because she probably got in trouble for this. But they tricked her. Like, how excited were you to know that you were a Palpatine this whole time? And she was all like, oh, like you know, they kind of twisted the question around a little bit. But in the interview, she said, like, she's like, oh my god, I was so excited. I kept guessing every day. Like, we were almost done with filming, and I didn't know till the last minute, and we actually changed a couple times during shooting. I'm like, oh, you what?
Yeah, they changed who she
what?
was throughout the entirety of the shooting. She was originally meant to be a Kenobi, and then she became Ben's twin. But then they realized that didn't make sense because they used an actress way too young in the flashback. And then she changed to nobody. And then she was going to be a Kenobi again.
That's crazy,
And then they
man.
changed her to Palpatine when they killed Snoke.
That's just like,
I think
I've never heard of that before in a film where we're just like, they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, for their, what I like to call their engine character.
Yes.
A character that is quite literally driving the story while the main character is going through his arc.
Yeah. And I feel like the reason they gave her the Rey Skywalker name at the very end was because the title was called Rise of Skywalker, which in my opinion, when I hear that title, I think of Ben Solo.
Yes, and that's why I think Ben's the main character.
I agree, but they gave her the last name, Skywalker, because that's the last thing you hear before you see the title screen at the very end. I'm Rey Skywalker, and then it says The Rise of Skywalker, and people are like, oh, that's why it's called that. It's like, I feel like that's why they did that. It just, I don't know, man. She took Luke's home. She took his X-wing. She took his saber. And now she took his last name. It's just like, I don't know, man. It's kind of messed up.
So they explained this a little bit. Ben, when he was redeemed, if he survived the Palpatine fight, he was gonna go by Ben Skywalker thereon after. and then he was gonna marry Rey, and she was gonna get the last name.
Wait, why wouldn't he go by Ben Solo?
He didn't vibe with it.
Oh.
Yeah, he didn't vibe with it. He wanted to be a Skywalker. Like
That makes sense.
he
Yeah, okay,
cared.
that makes sense.
He identified more as Anakin's grandson than Han's son.
It's like, damn, my dad has no cool powers. He's lame.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was just because they wanted to keep the Skywalker name alive.
Yeah.
Because there were no other Skywalkers.
Yeah.
Shout out Shmi, keeping it real. So if I had to describe the sequels in a paragraph, I would say it is the interpretation of a lost translation of what was happening in the galaxy 2 decades after Return of the Jedi.
3 decades.
3 decades after the Return of the Jedi. A lost translation, misinterpretation. Because Star Wars is a story that's being told, you know? Maybe that's what it is. It's just a messed up interpretation.
Alternate universe. Problem solved.
I don't want that shit in Star Wars, though, so it'll be tough.
Well, hold on. Here, how about this idea? I saw this theory online. I was like, okay, this is, I think, not going to happen, but I'm like, it's an interesting theory because it makes sense. So the one thing with the Ahsoka show is we're going to a completely different galaxy, right? We're probably not going to be there very long, but like, this is the first time, I think, in any Star Wars media we're ever introduced to an alternate galaxy. Ever. Like, even in the Old Republic, they don't galaxy hop. So that kind of makes me wonder, like, brand new galaxy, brand new place, hasn't been touched by Disney. Maybe that's where the future of Star Wars is.
Yeah.
And we kind of just dump all the Disney characters in the Disney galaxy, and we go have fun in the Lucas galaxy or the Filoni galaxy. Because I'm like, that beats a multiverse idea or a time travel idea or an alternate universe. Because Star Wars doesn't really deal with that. But I'm like, another alternate galaxy. I'm like, that kind of makes sense though.
It would.
A little bit.
The issue is they're bringing Thrawn back.
Yeah, I know, but what if what if Thrawn is that catalyst to our freedom though? We need to sacrifice Thrawn to the Disney gods to get a new galaxy and a fresh start.
Well, he has to be sacrificed, but
Yeah.
only after he resurrects the Empire as the First Order.
He reinstates their benefits
Yep.
and all their gym memberships, and they're all happy.
So our key takeaways from the sequels is that they were mishandled, but there were still some great things, including Kylo Ren, Ben Solo. Rey was a good character who is misinterpreted a little bit, and Finn got done dirty. And that's about where we're at, and that's gonna do it for the episode, folks. It's been the Archives Podcast. Shout out to Van Seal for hopping on and joining us. And that is our deep dive into the sequels. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, hit us up at Star Wars TAP. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. And with that all being said, it's been your boy AlsoTeeko, Van Seal, and we will catch you all later, alligator. Peace, love, and life. May the Force be with you always.